The night was dark and silent, the kind of night when every sound feels louder than usual. The wind moved slowly through the tall trees, making them whisper like old voices sharing secrets. Far away from the city, a man walked alone. His name did not matter right now, but his steps were steady, his eyes alert. He liked the silence of the forest at night. It was the only place where his mind felt calm, away from the noise of the world. But tonight, the silence was broken. First came the strange glow in the sky. It was not the glow of stars or the bright white of the moon. This light moved too fast, flashing across the dark sky in sharp streaks. At first he thought it was a falling star, but then the light grew bigger, brighter, and hotter. It was not falling gracefully, it was crashing. The ground shook as a terrible roar cut through the forest. Birds exploded into the night sky, wings beating fast in fear. The man stopped, his heart hammering. The sound was close, too close. The air smelled of burning metal and smoke. Without thinking, his legs carried him toward the sound. Curiosity pulled him forward, but so did something else, a strange feeling that he was about to witness something no one else would believe. Through the trees, he saw it. A ship. It was broken, half buried into the earth, smoke rising from its glowing body. It was nothing like the planes he had seen in the sky before. The shape was smooth and curved, like it was grown instead of built. Strange blue lights flickered weakly across its surface. Sparks jumped out, lighting up the ground with sharp white flashes. The man froze, his breath caught in his throat. His mind raced. Was it military? A secret machine? Or something not from this world? Then he heard it. A sound. A weak, trembling cry. Not metal, not fire, a living voice. He stepped closer, carefully moving around the wreckage. The hep that stung his skin. The smoke made his eyes water. Still, the cries pulled him forward like invisible hands dragging him closer. He looked inside. There, among broken pieces of the ship, lay a figure. The light flickered over her body, revealing skin that shimmered faintly under the smoke, a color not like any human he had seen. Her shape was almost human, but different in small ways. Her eyes larger, her face sharper, her body thin and wounded. She was holding something close to her chest. A child. The child's eyes were wide and glowing faintly, staring up at the stranger who had appeared. Small arms wrapped tightly around the mother's neck, the way any frightened child would cling to safety. The mother coughed, a weak sound, blood staining her lips. She tried to move, but she was too weak. The man's chest tightened. They were alive, they were suffering, and they needed help. But his mind screamed at him, "This is not normal, this is not safe." Every story he had ever heard about strange things falling from the sky warned him to run, to hide, to protect himself. What if soldiers came? What if others were already searching? If he stayed, he might be caught, questioned, maybe worse. Yet when he looked at the child again, his fear broke. The small alien's hand reached out, trembling, almost like it was asking him not to leave. His legs shook as he climbed into the wreckage. Heat burned his arms, but he pushed forward. The mother looked at him with tired, frightened eyes. For a moment, he thought she might strike him, but instead, she only tightened her arms around her child. "I'll help," the man whispered, though he knew they could not understand his words. His voice trembled, but his decision was made. He pulled at the broken metal, making space. The ship groaned and hissed like a dying beast. Flames spread through the wreck, climbing toward them. The man worked. Quickly, lifting the mother's arm over his shoulder, supporting her weight. She was heavier than he expected, yet fragile, like carrying glass that might break at any moment. The child clung to her and stared at the man with silent eyes, trusting him without knowing why. Step by step, he carried them out. The heat followed, the flames chasing them like angry spirits. He stumbled, nearly falling, but he refused to stop. At last, they broke free into the cool night air. Behind them, the ship groaned louder. A bright explosion burst into the sky, sending sparks raining down like deadly stars. The man shielded the mother and child with his body, protecting them from the fiery blast. When the noise faded, all that remained was smoke, glowing wreckage and silence once again. The man's breathing was heavy, sweat and ash covering his face. The mother looked up at him, her eyes filled with something he did not expect. Not fear, not anger, but hope. The child pressed its small head against his shoulder, clinging tightly as though he was no stranger but someone safe, someone they could trust. The man's heart pounded with confusion. He had just crossed a line no human was supposed to cross. He had touched beings from another world. He had chosen to save them, not abandon them. And he knew this was only the beginning, because somewhere out in the dark forest, others must have heard the crash. Others might already be coming. But for this moment, it was only him, the alien mother, and her child. 3 lives tied together by fire, fear, and something far greater, an unspoken bond. And as he stood there, with the smell of smoke still burning in the air, he understood one thing: his life would never be the same again. The forest was quiet again, but not peaceful. The silence now felt heavy, filled with danger, like the air was waiting to explode again. Smoke still rose from the ruined ship, spreading across the trees in a gray blanket. Sparks burned on the ground, glowing like red eyes in the dark. The man stood there, breathing hard, his arms supporting the weak alien mother. She leaned against him, her skin trembling with every breath. The child was pressed tightly to her chest, small glowing eyes never leaving the stranger's face. He had saved them from the fire, but the danger was not over. The mother coughed, her body shaking. Strange blue blood stained her lips. She tried to stand on her own, but her legs gave way, almost pulling him down with her. He caught her quickly, steadying her. She was light but weak, as if every movement cost her all her strength. The child let out a soft cry, a sound so human it pierced his heart. "We need to move," the man whispered, though he knew they could not understand. His voice was sharp with urgency. His instincts screamed at him. Someone must have seen the crash. Planes, soldiers, or something worse could already be on their way. He looked around, scanning the forest. Shadows danced between the trees, and for a moment, every shadow looked like a figure. His stomach tightened. There was only one choice: hide. He pulled the mother's arm over his shoulder and guided her forward. She stumbled, but the man's grip was strong. Step by step, they moved away from the burning wreck. The child clung tighter, small hands digging into the man's shirt. It was as if the little one already understood. This human was their only chance. Every sound in the forest felt dangerous. The snap of a branch, the rustle of leaves. His heart raced. He kept walking, his boots crunching softly on the ground. His ears strained for new sounds, voices, engines, helicopters. And then, there it was. A faint thudding noise in the distance, rotors cutting the sky. A helicopter. His chest tightened. He was right. Someone was coming. "Faster," he muttered under his breath. He pushed forward, guiding them deeper into the trees, away from the sound of approaching engines. The alien mother oaked at him, her eyes wide and glowing faintly in the dark. She did not speak, but her gaze was clear, fear mixed with fragile trust. She was letting him lead. After what felt like forever, they reached a small hollow in the forest. A broken log, half rotten, leaned against a cluster of rocks. It was not much, but it offered cover. "Here," he said, lowering her gently against the stones. The child shifted, refusing to let go until he carefully lifted the little one into his arms. The child weighed almost nothing, but its small body trembled with fear. The man placed the child back beside its mother, then crouched low, scanning the trees. The sound of helicopters grew louder, sweeping over the forest like predators searching for prey. A bright beam of light cut through the trees far away, moving slowly as it searched the ground. The man's breath caught. If that light moved closer, they would be seen. The mother reached out weakly, her hand brushing his arm. She pointed to the child, then to the forest, then back to him. The meaning was clear: protect my child. He nodded once. Time dragged on like heavy chains. The helicopter passed, the light cutting across the smoke, but it did not stop. Slowly the sound faded into the distance. Relief washed over him, but only for a moment. If one came, more could follow. He turned back to the mother. Her breathing was rough, uneven. The wound on her side was bleeding, glowing faintly with the same strange light that ran across the wrecked ship. He frowned. He had no idea how to treat an alien wound, but he could not just watch her die. From his backpack, he pulled out a torn cloth and pressed it against her side. She flinched, her face tightening, but then her eyes softened. She understood he was trying to help. The child watched every move carefully, eyes wide. Then, with a small, shaky hand, the child copied him, pressing its tiny fingers against the cloth, as if to help stop the bleeding. The man's chest ached at the sight. Even in fear, even in pain, the child wanted to save and buy. "It's mother, brave little one," he whispered. The mother's lips moved, forming strange sounds, soft and broken. The words were impossible to understand, but the tone was clear. It was gratitude. The man stayed close, his ears alert, his body tense. Every rustle in the forest kept him on edge. His mind raced with questions. Who were they? Why were they here? Who was hunting them? And what would happen if others found out he was helping them? But answers would not come tonight. Tonight, Only survival mattered. He looked at the child, then the mother. Their faces reflected fear, exhaustion, and something deeper, hope. He realized then that he had crossed another line. It was no longer just about saving them from fire. It was about keeping them alive from whatever danger hunted them. The man glanced once more at the dark forest, then back at the two fragile figures in front of him. "I'll protect you," he whispered, as much to himself as to them. The mother closed her eyes, her head resting back against the rock. The child, still watching him, slowly leaned forward and pressed its small hand against his chest. The gesture was simple, but it carried a heavy meaning: trust. For the first time in years, the man felt something stir inside him, something he thought he had lost long ago: purpose. The helicopters had faded for now, but danger was not gone. The night was still heavy with threat. But here, in the quiet hollow, a human man, a wounded alien mother, and her trembling child had formed a fragile bond, a bond strong enough to defy fear, fire, and even the unknown. And though he could not explain why, he knew this was only the beginning of something far greater than himself. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, a maze of shadows and whispering trees. Smoke from the wreck still lingered in the air, curling into the night like a ghost that refused to die. The man's body ached from carrying the weight of two lives, but he pressed on. Each step felt heavier, not because of the mother leaning on him, but because of the choice he had made. He could have left them there. He could have walked away and forgotten what he saw. But now every breath of the child and every cough of the mother tied him tighter to them. He was no longer just a witness. He was a part of their survival. The helicopters had faded into the distance, but the forest held other dangers. He knew soldiers would come. Governments would not ignore a crash from the sky. Hunters, human or alien, could appear at any moment. He needed a place to hide them, at least until morning. His mind searched through old memories of these woods. He had spent years walking these trails, hunting, camping, escaping his own lonely thoughts. He remembered a place, far from the paths people used, a cabin. It had once belonged to an old hermit, long dead now. The cabin was broken, half-eaten by time, but its walls still stood. It was forgotten, hidden behind thick trees and vines. If he could reach it, it would give them cover for a while. "Just a little longer," he muttered, more to himself than to them. The mother stumbled, her breath shallow, but she did not fall. The child clung to her side, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The sight of that glow made him nervous. It could give them away, but he also knew it was the child's nature. He could not hide it, only protect it. Finally, after what felt like endless walking, he saw it. The shape of the old cabin, leaning under the weight of years. Its roof sagged, and the wood was dark with rot. To anyone else, it looked abandoned, worthless. But tonight, it was salvation. He pushed the broken door open with his foot. The hinges groaned loudly, a noise that made him wince. Every sound felt too loud in this hunted night. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of old wood. Spiderwebs hung in the corners, and the floor creaked under his boots. But it was shelter. He guided the mother inside and lowered her gently onto a pile of old blankets left in a corner. She winced in pain, but gave him a faint nod. Her child crawled beside her, pressing its small head against her shoulder, trying to comfort her. For a moment, the man just stood there, staring at them. The scene was strange, unreal. A human man in a ruined cabin, protecting a wounded alien woman and her glowing child. If someone had told him this story yesterday, he would have laughed. But tonight, it was his truth. He pulled off his jacket and placed it over the mother to keep her warm. Then, he searched the cabin quickly. His hands brushed against old shelves, broken chairs, and rusted tools. In one corner, he found a tin box with matches. In another, a cracked pot. He built a small fire in the fireplace. The flames licked the dry wood, filling the cabin with a faint orange glow. The warmth spread slowly, chasing away the bite of the cold night. The child's eyes reflected the fire, wide and curious. The little one reached out a hand toward the flame but pulled back quickly, startled by the heat. The man smiled faintly despite the weight pressing on him. Children were children, no matter what world they came from. He returned to the mother. Her breathing was shallow, her wound still bleeding. He opened his small first aid kit and took out bandages. He hesitated. Would human medicine even help her? But it was all he had. He cleaned the wound as gently as he could, though she flinched at the touch. The blue blood shimmered strangely, glowing faintly in the firelight. When he wrapped the bandage around her side, she placed her hand weakly over his, stopping him for a moment. Her eyes met his, large, tired, but full of something unexpected. Trust. She did not speak, but she didn't need to. The message was clear. She was letting him care for her, letting him protect her child. The man swallowed hard and finished. It is work. He was no doctor, but at least the bleeding slowed. The child crawled closer to him, tilting its head as though studying him. Then, in a sudden small movement, the child touched his hand. Its fingers were thin, delicate, and cool. The touch was brief, but it carried meaning. The man looked at the mother. She watched silently, her lips curling into the faintest shadow of a smile. For the first time that night, the tension inside him eased. But peace did not last long. Outside, in the distance, the sound of engines rumbled again. This time, not from the sky, but from the ground. Vehicles, heavy ones. They were searching the forest. The man's jaw tightened. He moved quickly, putting out the fire until only faint embers glowed. Darkness filled the cabin again, broken only by the dim light from the child's eyes. He crouched by the window, peering through the broken wood. Headlights flashed faintly in the distance, cutting through the trees like knives. "They're coming," he whispered. His heart pounded, but when he turned back to the mother and child, he felt no doubt. He would not abandon them now. This was his choice, his burden, and maybe his purpose. The cabin creaked softly as the wind pressed against its broken walls. Inside, 3 lives waited in the dark, bound together by fire, fear, and a fragile trust. And as the sound of engines grew louder, the man knew the night was far from over. The old cabin groaned under the weight of the night wind. Every creak made the man's heart jump. He stayed near the broken window, his eyes fixed on the faint glow of headlights passing in the distance. Engines rumbled, men shouted, but slowly the noise faded again, swallowed by the forest. Only when silence returned did he allow himself to breathe. He turned back. The alien mother was lying against the wall, wrapped in his jacket, her breathing shallow but steady. The child sat beside her, wide glowing eyes following every move he made. He crouched near the fire pit and lit a small flame again, keeping it low so the light wouldn't, then escaped through the cracks. The warmth spread across the room, soft and gentle. The child moved closer, sitting just across from him, its small head tilted, studying him as if trying to solve a puzzle. The man smiled faintly, though his eyes were heavy with worry. "You don't even know what I'm saying," he whispered. "But you're not afraid anymore, are you?" The child blinked, then mimicked his gesture, raising its small hand in the air. It was almost like a wave. The man chuckled softly. Children, he thought, were the same everywhere, curious, brave, and quick to trust. The mother stirred, opening her large eyes. She watched them silently, a weak but protective gaze. The man understood that look. It was the same way any parent guarded their child. Even now, even wounded, her first thought was to keep her little one safe. He remembered the weight of loneliness in his own life, the empty house he had returned to night after night, the silence that had been his only company. Watching this mother and child pressed against each other, he felt something sharp twist inside him. For years he had been alone. Now, in the most unlikely way, he was no longer. He reached into his pack and pulled out some food, bread, dried meat, and a bottle of water. He placed them gently on the floor. The child's eyes widened, slowly, carefully. It reached out and touched the bread. Then it looked at its mother. She gave a weak nod. The child broke off a piece, sniffed it curiously, and then took a small bite. Its face lit up in surprise, and for the first time since the crash, it let out a soft sound that was almost laughter. The man couldn't help but smile. He offered water next, lifting the bottle toward the mother. She hesitated, but then accepted. She drank slowly, her throat working painfully. When she finished, her glowing eyes met his, and though no words passed, the meaning was clear. "Thank you." Hours passed slowly. The forest outside remained restless, but inside the cabin, a fragile calm took root. The man adjusted the bandages, keeping the wound clean. Each time he touched her side, the mother winced but did not push him away. Trust was being built in silence, through small actions. The child moved closer to him, sitting by his leg as though it had decided he was safe. It held one of his fingers in its small hand, gripping tightly even as it drifted to sleep. The man froze for a moment, staring down at the tiny hand holding his. Something inside him cracked open, something he had buried for years. He let the child rest, his free hand gently adjusting the blanket around its shoulders. The fire crackled softly. Shadows danced across the walls, wrapping the 3 of them in fragile warmth. But peace never lasted long. Near midnight, The mother stirred suddenly, her body tense. Her eyes glowed brighter, scanning the darkness. She whispered in a strange language, the sound sharp and urgent. The man leaned forward, trying to understand. "What is it?" he whispered. The child woke, clinging to her. The mother pointed weakly toward the forest. Her hand shook as she made a clawing motion, then tapped her chest twice. The man didn't understand the words, but he understood the fear. They were not safe yet. Something, or someone, was still hunting them. His stomach tightened. Whoever was out there, it wasn't just soldiers or search teams. The mother's fear ran deeper, older, like she had faced this danger before. The man rose to his feet, checking the cabin walls, the windows, the weak spots. He found an old hunting knife left behind by the hermit and slid it into his belt. It wasn't much, but it was something. He sat back down, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The mother watched him, her eyes softer now. Slowly, she lifted her hand and touched her chest, then pointed at him. She repeated the gesture, then at the child. The meaning dawned on him. She was saying something simple, something human. You are with us now. You are family. The man's throat tightened. He had saved strangers, yes, but in their eyes, he was no longer a stranger. For the rest of the night, he stayed awake, guarding them as they slept. The fire burned low, casting faint light across their faces. He watched the rise and fall of the mother's chest, the way the child curled against her, and felt a strange warmth grow inside him. For the first time in years, he was not just surviving. He was protecting. He was needed. And though he could not see the hunters moving through the dark forest, he knew they were out there, searching, waiting. The bond between him, the mother, and the child was fragile, but it was real. And because of that bond, he would not let anyone take them. Not tonight. Not ever. The morning came slow and heavy. Pale light pushed through the cracks of the cabin, cutting lines across the dusty floor. The man had not slept. He sat near the door, knife in hand, his ears sharp for every sound. The alien mother still lay weak against the wall, her wound bandaged but far from healed. Her child curled beside her, glowing eyes closed in deep sleep. The man had watched them all night, the rise and fall of their breathing reminding him why he stayed awake. But as the sun climbed higher, the forest changed. The birds did not sing, the air felt heavy, too still, as if the woods were holding its breath. The man knew this silence well. It was the silence before danger. Then he heard it, a distant crunch of footsteps, not one but many. Heavy boots moving in rhythm, breaking branches, pressing against leaves. His grip on the knife tightened. Whoever they were getting closer. The mother stirred, her large eyes opening. She looked at him, then toward the sound, and her face darkened. She whispered something low, words in a language he could not understand, but the tone was a no. Ugh, fear. The child woke and pressed against her side, trembling. The man crouched near the window and peered through the cracks. Shadows moved between the trees. At first he thought they were soldiers, but then he froze. These figures did not move like soldiers. They moved too fast, too smooth, slipping from one tree to another like predators on the hunt. And when one stepped into the light, his stomach dropped. It was not human. The figure was tall and lean, its body wrapped in armor that shimmered like liquid metal. Its head was sharp, insect-like, with glowing red eyes that scanned the forest. In its hands, it carried a weapon unlike any gun he had seen before. Hunters. The mother made a soft sound, almost a whimper, pulling the child closer. She looked at the man with desperate eyes, and he understood instantly. These were the ones she feared. They weren't here to rescue, they were here to kill. The man's chest tightened. He had nothing but a knife, an old cabin, and courage. Against hunters like these, it was suicide. But leaving them was not an option. He whispered low, "Stay quiet. Don't move." The mother nodded faintly, though her body shook. The child buried its face against her chest, trying to hide the glow of its eyes. Outside, the hunters spread out. One crouched low, brushing its clawed fingers against the soil, studying the ground like a tracker. Its head lifted slowly, turning toward the cabin. The man's breath caught. They were coming. He looked around the cabin quickly. Broken tools, rotten wood, rusted nails. None of it was enough. But he had one advantage. The cabin was old, but it was full of shadows and tight corners. If he played it smart, he could buy time. He moved silently, pushing a chair against the door, then scattering the floor with broken glass and wood. If the hunters came in, they would make noise, and he would have a chance to strike. His heart hammered so loudly he feared they would hear it. The first hunter reached the cabin door. Its claws brushed the wood, scratching slowly, almost playfully. The sound made the child whimper, a small, sharp cry. The man's stomach twisted. He pressed his finger to his lips, begging for silence. The hunter tilted its head, listening. Then, with sudden force, it slammed the door. The old wood shuddered, but held for the moment. The man raised his knife, ready. Another slam, this time harder. The chair cracked. Dust fell from the ceiling. The mother's eyes widened in terror. She grabbed her child tighter, her gaze locked on the man. There was no language between them, no words, but her meaning was clear. Protect my child, no matter what happens. The door exploded inward. The first hunter stepped through, tall and gleaming, its red eyes scanning the dark room. It hissed, a sound sharp like metal grinding. The man charged. His knife struck deep into the hunter's arm. The creature roared, swinging wildly. The man ducked, barely missing the strike, and shoved the broken chair into its chest. The hunter stumbled back, crashing against the wall. Another shadow filled the doorway. A second hunter. The man's blood turned cold. He had no chance against two. But then, something happened. The mother raised her trembling hand. Light flickered from her palm, weak but sharp, like a blade of energy. It shot across the room, striking the second hunter in the chest. The creature staggered, armor cracking, red eyes flashing with anger. The man stared in shock, but only for a moment. He moved again, grabbing a rusted tool from the floor and swinging it hard. It smashed into the first hunter's head, sending sparks flying. The cabin filled with chaos, roars crashing wood, the sharp cry of the child. The hunters pressed forward, but the man and the wounded mother fought with everything they had. It wasn't victory. Not yet, but it was resistance. And in that fight, something stronger than fear grew. The man realized. Eddie was not just protecting strangers. He was standing with them, side by side. A human, an alien mother, and her child, bound together against hunters that should have been unstoppable. His arms burned with effort, his chest pounded with fear, but his heart was fierce. He would not let them be taken. Not while he still drew breath. The cabin shook as the hunters forced their way inside. Dust rained down from the ceiling, the old wood groaning under the weight of violence. The air was hot with sparks and smoke, the smell of burning metal mixing with fear. The man stood at the center of the room, knife in one hand, a rusted tool in the other. His chest heaved with every breath, but his eyes were hard. Beside him, the alien mother leaned against the wall, her arm glowing faintly as she gathered what little strength remained. The child crouched low behind her, trembling but silent. The first hunter snarled, its red eyes glowing like burning coals. The second stalked forward, its weapon humming with energy, a low deadly sound that filled the room with dread. The man's body screamed at him to run. His mind shouted that he could not win, but his heart refused to move. These two fragile lives depended on him. He had chosen this fight. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, steadying himself. The first hunter lunged. The man dodged, swinging the tool hard across its head. Sparks flew, the metal denting but not breaking. The hunter roared, swiping its clawed hand. Pain exploded across his arm as it caught him, cutting deep. Blood splashed the floor, but he didn't fall. The second hunter raised its weapon. A flash of light shot forward, striking the wall where the mother had been. Wood exploded in shards. She pulled the child close, shielding it with her body. Her weak hand glowed brighter, and with a sudden cry, she sent another pulse of light forward. It struck the hunter's chest, forcing it back a step. The man pressed the attack. He slammed his knife deep into the first hunter's neck joint, twisting with all his strength. The creature howled, flailing wildly. The man was thrown back, crashing against the wall, pain rattling his bones. He coughed, spitting blood, but forced himself up again. His vision blurred, yet his grip on the knife tightened. The hunters closed in. Their steps were heavy, their roars sharp. They moved like shadows, circling him, waiting for the moment to strike. The mother's voice rose, broken words in her alien tongue, but filled with urgency. She pointed at the child, then at him. Her meaning was clear. "Don't let them take my child." The man's heart clenched. He looked at the small, glowing eyes watching him with fear and trust. Something fierce ignited inside him. He roared. Charging forward, he threw himself at the first hunter, slamming the knife again and again into its chest plates. Metal cracked, sparks burst. The creature shrieked, staggering backward, crashing into the fireplace. Flames spread across its armor, hissing as it thrashed. The second hunter struck him across the back. Pain ripped through his body, dropping him to his knees. The weapon hummed again, charging for another blast. But before it fired, the mother used the last of her strength. A blinding wave of light burst from her hand, striking the hunter's face. Its red eyes shattered into sparks, its head twisting violently as it stumbled into the wall. The cabin groaned under the force of the fight. Beams cracked, dust fell like rain, the fire spread. The man forced himself up, gripping the knife though his hand shook. His body screamed with every step, but he pushed forward one last time. He leapt onto the second hunter, driving the blade deep into the glowing crack on its armor. The creature screeched, its body convulsing. He held on tight, refusing to let go. With a final desperate twist, the blade sank deeper, and the hunter collapsed to the ground with a heavy crash. Silence followed. The man stumbled barely standing. His chest burned, his wounds bleeding freely. He dropped the knife, his hands shaking. The first hunter lay broken in flames, the second motionless on the floor. The cabin was falling apart. Smoke filled the room, the roof sagging dangerously. He turned to the mother. She was on the ground, barely conscious, her energy spent. The child clung to her, sobbing softly, its glow flickering. The man rushed to them, lifting the mother onto his shoulder once more. Pain shot through his back, but he ignored it. He scooped the child into his other arm, holding both tightly. The roof groaned, ready to collapse. With the last of his strength, he pushed through the broken door, stumbling into the open forest. Behind him, the cabin gave one final scream and fell in on itself, flames rising into the morning sky. The man collapsed onto the cold ground, gasping for air. His vision swam, but he looked down at the two lives in his arms. The child clung to him tightly, its glowing eyes filled with tears. The mother's weak hand reached up, brushing his cheek. She whispered something soft, her voice fragile but filled with meaning. He didn't know the words, but he didn't need to. He understood. You saved us. His body felt heavy, his strength nearly gone. But in his heart, he felt something stronger than pain. He had stood against monsters he could not understand. He had fought when every instinct told him to flee. He had protected them. And as the forest wind cooled the sweat on his skin, he knew one truth. He would keep standing for them, again and again, no matter the cost. The forest was quiet again, but it was not the same silence as before. This silence was heavy with smoke and memory, the echo of a battle that had nearly destroyed them. The ruined cabin burned in the distance, flames climbing into the pale morning sky. The hunters were gone, their bodies broken, but their presence lingered like a shadow. The man sat against a tree, his body torn with pain. Cuts burned along his arms, his back ached from the heavy blows, and blood stained his clothes. His chest rose and fell slowly, every breath a battle of its own. Beside him lay the alien mother, her eyes half closed, her skin pale and weak. The child pressed tightly against her side, glowing eyes filled with worry. It reached out its tiny hand and touched her face, as if trying to call her back to strength. The man's heart ached at the sight. He leaned forward, checking her wound, adjusting the bandages. His hands were clumsy from exhaustion, but he kept working. "You're not dying here," he whispered firmly, though the words were more for himself than for her. The mother's eyes opened slowly. She looked at him, her gaze soft, filled with something he had not seen before. Peace. Her lips moved, shaping a faint sound in her strange language. He did not understand the words, but the tone carried meaning, gratitude, trust. The child looked at him then, its small, glowing eyes steady. It crawled toward him, climbing into his lap with surprising boldness. Tiny fingers gripped his shirt, holding him tightly, as if afraid he might disappear. The man froze for a moment, then wrapped his arm around the little one carefully. The child's head rested against his chest, and in that quiet moment, he felt something break inside him, loneliness. The emptiness he had carried for years was being replaced with something new, something warm. Family. The mother watched, her lips curling into the faintest smile. With weak effort, she reached out, placing her trembling hand on his arm. The gesture was small, but the weight of it was heavy. He looked at them, the mother, broken but alive, the child, fragile but full of light, and he understood. He was no longer alone. They were no longer alone. But peace was fragile. The forest still felt dangerous. The hunters were dead, but others could come. Governments, soldiers, or more of those red-eyed creatures might already be searching. They could not stay here. The man forced himself to stand, ignoring the fire in his muscles. He helped the mother up, supporting her as he had done before. The child clung to his side, unwilling to let go. Step by step, they moved deeper into the forest, away from the smoke, away from the ruin. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, light spilling across the trees. The forest, once filled with fear, began to soften. Birds sang again, as if the woods themselves believed the danger was gone. At last they reached a stream. The water was clear, running fast over smooth stones. The man lowered the mother onto the bank gently, letting her rest. He cupped his hands into the cold water and brought it to her lips. She drank slowly, her breathing easing a little. The child splashed its small hands in the stream, laughing softly. The sound was pure, bright, and for the first time since the crash, it carried no fear. The man watched them, his heart heavy yet full. He knew this was not the end. Danger would return. The world would not accept them easily. But in this moment, by the water, they were not prey. They were simply a family trying to survive. He sat down beside them, letting the stream wash blood from his hands. He looked at the mother. Her eyes were closed, her body weak, but she leaned gently toward him, as if his presence gave her strength. The child crawled back into his lap, curling against him, its small hand pressed against his chest, right over his heart. He placed his own hand over the child's, holding it there. His throat tightened, but he spoke softly, a promise carried by the quiet air. "I'll protect you, both of you, no matter what comes." The wind moved gently through the trees, almost as if carrying his words away into the sky. For the first time in years, the man felt purpose. He was no longer just a wanderer, lost in the silence of the forest. He was a guardian, he was a father, he belonged. The hours drifted by, and the three of them rested by the stream. But as the sun dipped, low, turning the sky gold, a new light appeared above the horizon. At first, it looked like a star, but it moved too fast, too bright. The man's chest tightened. The mother opened her eyes, staring at the sky. Fear flickered across her face. She knew that light. The child clung tighter to him, its glow trembling. The man stood slowly, his jaw set, his body ready despite his wounds. Whatever was coming, he would face it. The first battle was over, but the war was not. Still, he was no longer afraid. Because he was not standing alone. He had a family now, and he would fight for them until his last breath.